bring some stories if they were interested in it. And we have a number that brought some, so we'll just start off and we'll do whatever we got time for within, I don't know how long, however long we want to stay. And the ones that we don't get finished with, we'll do them next time. So you want to introduce what you're going to talk about?
Okay. On the Native, I belong to a Native American community called Native American Spirits Community, and it's kind of like a Facebook group. So they have all kinds of things. So anyways, I found this picture. It's called The Legend of the Cherokee Rose. It says the Cherokee were driven from their homelands over 100 years ago when gold was discovered in their lands. The journey known as the Trail of Tears was a terrible time for the people. Many died from the hardships and the women wept. The old men knew the women must be strong to help the children survive, so they called upon the Great One to help their people and to give the mothers strength. The Great One caused the plant to spring up everywhere a mother's tear had fallen upon the ground on the journey. He told the old men that the plant would grow quickly, then fall back to the ground and another stem would grow. The plant would have white blossoms, a beautiful rose with 5 petals and gold in the center, for the greed of the white man on the gold of their land. The leaves would have 7 green leaflets, one for each Cherokee clan. The plant would be strong and grow quickly throughout the land, all along the Trail of Tears. The stickers on the stem would protect it from those who might try to move it, as it spread to reclaim some of the lost Cherokee homeland. The next morning, the women saw the beautiful white blossoms far back on the trail. When they heard what the Great One had said, they felt their strength returning and knew they would survive, and the children would grow, and the people would flourish in the new Cherokee nation.
Was that the Cherokee Rose?
Yeah.
When we bought that place in Tennessee, it had, all along the creek that ran beside the house was solid with those. And it was all springs, and her and my niece named our property Rosewood Springs from those Cherokee roses in the springs. And my niece made a great big sign put on the garage, Rosewood Springs, and painted our mailbox Rosewood Springs for the Cherokee roses.
I remember I was down in Lindale a few years ago. I don't remember what I was doing. I think they got a Native American group down there in Tyler, and they were holding one of their meetings in Lindale, I think. And when I turned to go up to where their house was, they had some of that stuff all along, some of that wild rose, off white, big old white petals like this. Real pretty.
Really pretty.
So you can find it around here.
Can you?
Yeah. This was just growing wild on a fence down there in Lindale.
Wow. It'd be cool to get some.
They really make it real odorous in the spring when all them roses are blooming.
Oh, yeah.
Man, I'll tell you what, it is sweet smelling. And,
That'd be fun to get some.
Yeah. You know where that, you go down to Lindale, and I think there's Highway 16 that crosses 37 there?
No, I'm.
yeah,
Oh, okay. Anyway, if you ever want to go down there, I'll give you directions. It's probably, you can't kill that stuff out hardly. It grows wild, so
Okay,
if it's on a fence, then if it was there, it's still there.
that's cool.
Well, thank you. That was interesting. Do you have something you want to? Do you have one?
for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see you got some paper there.
Oh, yeah. Now, mine's on fishing. Yeah. From the time I can remember, probably 3 or 4 years old, when I'd go fishing with my dad, he always spit on his hook. You know, put the bait on, spit on it, and he'd catch it. And couple of times when I went with my uncle, which was my dad's older brother, he'd do it. And he said, they both said, you gotta do that if you wanna catch fish. Well, why? I don't know. We've done it since we was kids, and it's just something you do. Well, I raised 3 boys, and my oldest boy, he just turned 57.
No,
56.
56.
And he was 9 months old, first time he fell out of a boat. He had a life jacket on, but yeah. I took my boys fishing all their life. And when we got ready to go fishing, they'd go to the cupboard and get the bag of bubble gum to chew so they could spit on their bait. And it's just something we've always done. And I really never give it any thought to the origin until I found an article. Well, I was reading in Cherokee Legends, and I'll read this to you. And from the formula, now, I'm not going to try to pronounce this guy's name. It's Steve could, it's Cherokee. The formula from A. Yunny, whatever, book is for the purpose of catching large fish. According to his instructions, the fisherman must first chew a small piece of, it gives the Indian name, but it's Venus flytrap, and spit it on the bait and also on the hook. Then standing facing the stream, he recites the formula and puts the bait on the hook. He will be able to pull a fish in at once, or if the fish are not about at that moment, they will come in a very short time. The Indian flytrap is put on the bait from the idea that it will enable the hook to attract and hold the fish as the plant seizes itself and holds insects in its trap. So this came from way back, the Cherokees did it. And my dad and my uncle did it when they was kids growing up. They did it up, as long as they fished up till they died. I'd do it. And it was funny, one time when I was in college, I took my hydraulics instructor up on Saginaw Bay. He had a boat and he wanted to go fishing. It was cold. And he wanted to go catch some yellow perch. I said, well, I'll go with you. I was going to General Motors Institute there in Flint. We go up on Saginaw Bay. It was cold, that boat was rocking. I put on a minnow, spit on it, flipped it out, and caught one. I had 13 fish in the boat, and he hadn't had a bite. And I kept telling him, you got to spit on your bait. And he says, I'm not spitting. Well, I was pulling in the 14th fish, and he used kind of a uncouth word to say in church. But he put a new minnow on spit, and as soon as he got it in, and most of our next hydraulics class that next week, that first class, was on spitting on the bait when you go fishing. So anyway, that's my story.
Where did this story come from?
Now I found it I've got it in a book someplace, and I got so many books, I didn't know which one, and I just spent an afternoon searching on the internet, and I found it. You can have that if you want.
This is comes from Unini. That's the swimmer. Swimmer manuscript.
Yeah.
And Mooney.
Yeah, if you read on down, it talks about the swimmer, but I didn't want to take a lot of time.
Mooney was a guy that did he worked for the government, and he went and interviewed a lot of Cherokee, and not just Cherokee, but other tribes too. He was wanting to document for the government a lot of their stories, but he didn't do this until in early 1900s. So a lot of people say that that he didn't really get the real story, that people would sometimes feed him lines, feed him BS because he was a white guy in there trying to find, they didn't want to give him all their secrets. So a lot of that stuff, he wrote a big book that's called Myth of the Cherokee, and nobody really knows if what he wrote is the truth or not, because whether or not they were giving him the right deal, or some of them might have given him the truth of stories.
We
So-
have that book.
But they had, those were like saying prayers and doing a lot of the stuff that everything they did,
like
you
a
would
sacred
have
ritual.
you would have a ritual and words to say that, it was just habits or what you was raised up to do,
But to me, I don't even think about doing it, and been fishing with people, you just spit on your bait, why'd you do that? Well, it's just something you do. I mean,
I don't know if any of you ever watched the Swamp People, where these guys go out and get alligators and all. Well, there's this man and his son are Indian. It might be Seminole, I'm not sure what, down in Florida.
RJ and Jay Paul.
Yeah, and they went out fishing one day, and of course they spit on the bait. And he says, that's our Indian tradition, you always spit on your bait.
Yeah, that was on television last week, and that's the first time I've ever seen them do that.
Well, that's interesting.
Efton's got one.
Okay, you got something to share with us?
Yeah, I do. Well, I'm just going to read something out of this book, Indian Gallery. It's about George Catlin, and I think a lot of y'all know who he is.
The artist, yeah.
Yeah, and if you don't, he traveled out in the West during the 1800s and visited all the different tribes and got to know them and painted portraits of the different peoples and their customs and everything. And I find it a very fascinating book. And so I'd like to read something from it. I'm also a painter, so I kind of identify with him, and I had painted this picture from my in-laws that live out in New Mexico, Arizona. And so I said, well, that kind of ties in with this, so I just brought it out, and I'll let you take a look at it. It's still a little wet, and give you a little bit of a visual of what this is all about. The white buffalo. But it's a Christmas present for my daughter's in-laws, and they're very much into Indian culture.
Did they one of them do the painting?
No, I did it.
Oh, you did it?
Yeah.
That's not for your in-laws.
Why?
I've got white buffaloes all over my house, that's gotta go to my place.
Sorry. If I don't give it to them, I gotta go out and spend money. This is a little thing from one of the books about Mr. Catlin, and I'll read it to you. It's he had boarded a paddle wheel steam powered boat in let's see, where was it? St. Louis, yeah. And he was traveling up the Mississippi and the Missouri River. The name of the boat was the YALL Stone, and he was carrying Catlin, a group of, I don't know if I can pronounce this, Assiniboine Indians who had been visiting Washington, and they were taking them back to their homeland. He was also had a group of what they call hard-living, tobacco-chewing, French-speaking fur traders, and so it was quite a little mixture. The Indians called the ship, they call it the Big Thunder Canoe or Big Medicine Canoe with Eyes. So anyway, I'll just kind of take it up from there. I'll try to read fast so that leave time for other people to speak. Now the YALL Stone was heading into trouble. A few days upriver from the deserted Ponca village, the ship ran aground on a sandbar. For a full week, she lay there while captain and crew searched the sky for rain clouds which would rescue them, but the sky remained clear. The ship's keel rested firmly on the bottom. As each day passed, Catlin grew more restless. The traders, too, were itching to be on their way and were beginning to grumble. The Indians, miserable at the long confinement they had already endured on board, lapsed into sullenness. One day, word reached the captain that at least 1,000 Sioux were encamped up ahead at the mouth of the Teton River, waiting to see the famous Thunder Canoe. The traders, hearing this, insisted on proceeding by land rather than wait any longer for rain. 20 of them announced that they would leave the ship and head for the encampment on foot. Naturally, Catlin begged to come with them, but the traders warned him in their colorful language, part French, part English, part profanity, that the march would be too much for a city man. Catlin could see nothing but soft, waving prairie grass ahead. It looked as though they would be walking on clouds. At last, seeing how eager the artist was, the traders relented. They strode off into the high grass and headed for the horizon. They waded waist deep through black-eyed Susans, purple clover, orange butterfly weeds, wild peas, and oceans of grass. Silvery grass, green grass, brown grass, red grass, 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 grass. From time to time, they startled a family of prairie chickens or a swarm of sky blue butterflies. But the sky stayed the same, the warm sun stayed the same west wind pounded at them across the prairie, and the same grass stretched in front of them all the way to the same flat horizon. Nonetheless, the artist trudged doggedly with his sketchbook slung over his back and his rifle in his hand. Every painful step brought him closer to the great Sioux encampment, but try as he might to keep up, Catlin fell further and further behind the group. Like the rest of the party, Catlin was wearing only soft-soled Indian moccasins, and like the city people, he had been walking with his toes turned out. The pain in his feet had become intolerable, and he was sure he would go no further. A wise half-breed Canadian sent back to find the struggling artist discovered the problem at once and gave Catlin a lesson in walking he'll never forget. Simply turn your toes in as the Indians do, he said in French. The change was miraculous, wrote Catlin. I soon found that by turning my toes in, my feet went more easily through the grass, and by turning the weight of my body more equally on the toes, I soon got relief and made my onward progress very well. I rigidly adhered to this mode and found no difficulty on the third and fourth days of taking the lead of the whole party, which I consistently led until the journey was completed. The little group passed huge herds of buffalo, which supplied them with food. At last, far in the distance, they saw a range of blue hills. It was the first landmark they'd seen in many days of endless, flat, unchanging horizon, and the weary men hailed it with joy. Bone tired, with Catlin still in the lead, the party arrived at Fort Pierre on the mouth of the Teton River. All around the little log trading post, Catlin could see the tall white wigwams of the Sioux. By now, Catlin had a well-tested system for gaining the confidence of the Indians. Here at Fort Pierre, as usual, the artist introduced himself to the chiefs, and after the customary exchange of compliment and flattery, he launched into his standard speech. He spoke at length of the white chiefs far to the east. These chiefs, he said, waited eagerly to see pictures of the great leaders of the West. He told them of the great hardships he had borne for the sake of painting such pictures. Then dramatically he unrolled a number of his best portraits, which he always carried with him for this purpose. As always, the Indians marveled at Catlin's work. Surely Catlin must have some magic power, they thought, to be able to paint so realistically. They crowded around eagerly, praising the skill of this great white chief and medicine man. Catlin knew it was time to get started with his work, and he invited the chiefs to come into the fort to have their portrait made. But he didn't move fast enough. Already the medicine men were circling around the camp, warning the tribesmen not to submit to any magic. They predicted bad luck and even death for any Indian unwise to let the mysterious stranger take away his face. The women began moaning and crying to show their fear. It looked as though Here among the magnificent Sioux, after a grueling 200-mile march, Catlin might lose the opportunity of a lifetime. He had no choice but to fight suspicion with flattery. Privately, he arranged a talk with Chief One Horn. He mentioned the chief's bravery, his wisdom, his fame as a warrior, his great leadership, and his fine face and figure. Surely such a brave and famous chief deserved to have his portrait shown to the brave and famous white chiefs of the East. One Horn could hardly turn down such an honor, and allowed Catlin to paint his portrait. The painting complete, Catlin hung it outside the fort for all to see. Then he brought the chief himself before the curious crowd to prove that One Horn was still alive and well. One Horn spoke to his people, telling him that the experience was quite painless after all. He called Catlin a great, I can't pronounce this, Ichazukagaukan, or medicine painter, who had come a long way to see the people and smoke with them. If they posed for him, he promised no harm would come. One Horn's speech undid much of the damage done by his medicine men, and scores of braves returned to their wigwams to dress for the portrait. He had to work long into the night at Fort Pierre because he often had to make 2 copies of each painting, one for his growing collection and one for the Indians to keep. The vanity of these men, he wrote, was beyond all description, and far surpassing that to which is often immodest enough in civilized society. An Indian often lays from morning till night in front of his portrait, admiring his own beautiful face and faithfully guarding it from day to day. Gradually, the Sioux lost some of their self-consciousness, and Catlin was allowed to paint their ceremonies and rituals. He was just finishing an exciting picture of Sioux dance when the riverboat below the fort, he heard the all too familiar sound of cannon fire, and shortly the YALL Stone chugged into sight, none the worse for her long ordeal on the sandbar. Fort Pierre was only the midpoint of Monsieur Chateau's proposed route, and he urged his passengers to get aboard without delay. Indian farewells, however, could not be rushed, and it was not until the following morning that the steamer could resume its voyage. So I think he did a lot to enlighten the people of what the Indian culture was all about, and I think probably raised, people out east, their opinion of the different tribes. That's all I have.
That's cool.
Excellent picture.
Yes.
I like it.
Sir?
So that's an excellent picture. I like it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Efton has not named this painting, and I told him that if it was mine, I would name it Buffalo Moon. If any of the rest of you have thoughts on helping him name the picture, please pass them on to him.
I'm taking requests.
Of course, it may turn out that his in-laws will do the naming, but he will at least have some suggestions for them.
What, is that acrylic, or is that oils?
That's all.
Very pretty.
It was fun.
All right. I wish Renee would have got here, because she told me she had a couple of stories for us. Anybody else have anything they brought to share?
Well, I've got,
The only thing I can think of, my only, I guess, connection in any way with Native Americans, I remember, when I was about 5 years old, we lived in Temple, Oklahoma, and my dad was a constable up there, and he had a couple of friends, Cotton and Alice Grover, and she was, I guess, a full-blood Indian. And I remember about her, after all these years, I can remember her name, and I guess the reason was she was so nice to us kids. I can remember her, and I remember her face, what it looked like, and just the fact that she was so kind. Some people you just never forget, when you meet, especially when you're a kid. And she was definitely one to remember.
You'll tell us her name?
Alice Grover. His name was Cotton, her husband's name was Cotton Grower. That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
1947, I believe, was about the year.
But don't ask me what he had for lunch
That's right.
yesterday.
Well, if Ed will hand me, Ed, if you hand me my glasses out of my purse there, I've got this little
You and your
story.
glasses.
Well, gotta have them. Just don't like to wear them all the time.
Can't read it if I'm not supposed to.
Yeah.
She didn't need them except for reading, I just spent $100 and got her some bifocals so she could have clear class and reading.
I just need to see where I'm going.
Anyway, this is a little, it's a American Indian cooking and herb lore, and we bought this in it's Cherokee Territory, and I think it was probably New Echota, Georgia, when we were out there. And this has this little cute little introduction, an ancient Indian legend. It says, once upon a time, in the beginning days of life upon the earth, man, animals, and plants lived together in equality and mutual helpfulness. Man was one with his environment in a beautiful balance of nature. The needs of all were met in a world of plenty. Man became quite aggressive, however, in his relationship to the rest of the world and began to care less and less for the rights and privileges of the others. Soon harmony was disrupted. Aggressive man was multiplying so rapidly that the other creatures became alarmed and called a meeting of all insects, birds, fishes, reptiles, and the four-footed beasts. Their hostility having been provoked, they joined forces against man and devised many diseases to slow down in his encroachment upon the earth. The bond between man and other creatures was broken. Man found that his aggressive behavior had brought much sickness upon him and had made it hard for him to secure the food he needed. Many methods were devised to appease the spirits of the animals which he killed for food. The plant life remained friendly to man, however, and when they heard about the many diseases inflicted upon him, they responded by offering themselves as cures and remedies for all his ailments. Each tree, herb, shrub, grass, and moss devised a cure for man if only he would discover and use it. Thus, man created a situation of struggle and turmoil. To have food and to keep himself healthy, he must consider the hostility of the animals and the friendship of the plant life. He must carefully and prayerfully secure and prepare his meat and plant foods within the difficulties that he himself had devised. Through the years, the delicate art of securing and preparing both food and medicines developed among the Indian peoples. Included in these pages is information designed to help both acquire one with Indian lore and provide usable recipes for enjoyment of Indian foods and medicines.
That's
This guy right on here is in Cherokee Territory, $2.95.
That's a pretty neat place, and if anybody hadn't ever been there, it's
Yeah.
it's interesting. It shows you.
And
This was after New Echota. It was after they had pretty much left all their Indian ways and become almost white because they organized they had outlawed the clan system, and they did away with their council, and they elected a chief and a council and a committee that was formed just like the American government.
actually, they say the American government copied that form.
Well, that was way before.
Way before, yeah.
But their council system involved everyone. That was done away with by this time. By the time of New Echota, and they moved there, and they had all of their government buildings. They actually had a printing press. They had the first Native American operated printing press there. So it's a pretty
Yeah, the Phoenix
interesting place.
the Phoenix. I got
It's still going.
I've got a picture of the original building with the original press and all in it there.
Yeah, they're still printing that, and you can get it online. They put it out just about every month if you go to the Cherokee website. All right, those were some good stories. I appreciate y'all. Enjoyed them and learned something. If you want to